welcome to Work the Left Side. This is the first episode of DeathMatch Wrestling for Dummies, aka me. I am the dummy, and I am being led down this rabbit hole into Deathmatch Wrestling by the one, the only Mr. Radu Bulat. Sir, how are you doing?
Doing pretty well. It's been a very busy weekend for me. Spent most of this morning just catching up an hour's sleep that I lost. But I'm happy to be busy. Happy to be going out and doing stuff, and seeing people thrive, seeing people do what they like to do. And here I am, about to introduce, hopefully, a good number of people to the wacky and interesting world of deathmatch wrestling. I will say, when we first started discussing that, in fact, we should probably mention about how we started, or we got the idea for starting this thing. I believe it was at Second Pursuit during the interval when we just got talking about just deathmatch wrestling in general, and you admitted you didn't really know too much about this particular style of wrestling, this particular genre of wrestling, should I say. And I can't remember if it was you or me that suggested the idea of an offshoot of your usual podcast, but yeah, we shared some messages, and I originally wanted to call it a couple of aspirin and grit your teeth, a monthly trip into the insane world of death matches. But you came up with a better idea. It's your platform. You do what you call it what you like. That said, however, because you've made that into a meme, I made the decision to get some of these and get some of this, and I've already taken it. I'm not going to take any others because that's bad for your liver. Let's just be honest. Not that drinking this stuff is really good for your liver either, but moderation, okay? Moderation is good. Let me think. Where should we get started with this whole thing?
Well, obviously, the first episode, we put out there, we had a bit of a discussion, and I presume because of the final, because of the iconicness of, the two people in the final, it was decided that we would do the IWA King of the Deathmatch 95 tournament. I ventured off, gave it a watch, and now I've come back slightly more traumatized, and especially after the Dan Severn match, which we will get to. For me personally, again, I hold my hands up. I know very little about the genre, about the folklore, the cultness, of everything. I've got to presume this whole show, this whole tournament is held in quite high regard. I know Alton Thorne said it's that's the reason he got into deathmatch wrestling as well, because I was talking to him, about it.
Yeah, you'd be hard pressed not to find anyone who likes deathmatch wrestling that hasn't seen this tournament. As I recall, it was probably one of the most popular videotapes that was in the tape trading days. It was probably one of the most popular ones that was distributed throughout the rather clandestine community that was the independent wrestling community back in those days, back before we had social media. There's actually a lot of interesting history. I had to check up some of this stuff, both including what was written in Mick Foley's book, but also from a guy on YouTube and the internet who's been documenting deathmatch wrestling and Japanese indie wrestling for probably about as long as most people have been watching this stuff. A guy called Brett from Bajo FMW. So thank you for that stuff, by the way. That was really, really good. Okay, so what can I start off with? IWA Japan. I'll start off with this. In 1995, there were very few promotions in Japan that did death matches. The biggest one was Frontier Martial Arts, FMW. There were some other rival promotions, Wing and IWA Japan, and eventually Big Japan, which is still going today. IWA Japan, the way that I describe it personally, is it was kind of like 1PW in a way, if 1PW did death matches. It was run by, frankly, a money mark by the name of Tatsukuni Asano, who ran a successful series of restaurants in Japan at the time. And keep in mind, this is like the 90s, and this will probably expose me as being an economics nerd, but at this point in history, Japan had a really long economic downturn from the boom that they had during the 80s. In fact, they even call the 90s the lost decade specifically for this reason. So the fact that IWA Japan was able to, go on for as long as it did, is nothing short of a miracle, but, we'll get into that later. IWA Japan imported a lot of foreign talent to work on their tours, mainly people from Puerto Rico, which is why you see the most notable figure in the deathmatch scene during the 90s, Victor Quinones, on quite a number of these shows. I won't go into too much detail about him, but his story is pretty interesting, especially when he was a manager in Wing, and he had some of the best promos ever. Again, we'll probably talk about that some other time. As I said before, Mick Foley's book has a lot of interesting stories about his time touring with IWA Japan, but we'll just concentrate specifically on this show. Okay, so
because Foley's got to be a massive part of why people have, seen this show. As much as it was probably traded around late 95, 96, it's one of those shows that have been consistently traded or searched for because of Funk or Foley. Their constant referencing of it. Anybody who's read Foley's book, just like the aftermath. We'll jump to the end a little bit, but when he got home the next day and people were being like, "Can you smell toast? Somebody burning toast," and Foley was like, "Yeah, no, it's me." His arm badly burned. You could still smell it. It was like his skin was still cooking.
Yeah, I was actually reading that extract from the book earlier today. It still astounds me that he was able to get out of that match with most of his faculties intact, because there's speaking from someone who's done, well, not specifically an explosion match, but for someone who's done death matches and has done some very dangerous things in general, there's a lot of give and take, and there's a lot of preparation that goes into these matches. The fact that they took the risk that they did and they were able to get out of it without far worse injuries than they did is probably a testament to the professionalism that pretty much every single person in this tournament had. Actually, I did make some small notes here. Would you like me to go into some small details about all the 8 competitors that we had here?
Bit of information on it, yeah.
Okay. I'll go through chronological order in the terms of the matches as they were put on the card. First match, the first death match, was Mr. Ganasuke versus Tigerjeet Singh. Mr. Ganasuke was basically a green boy at the time. He was like Tarzan Goto's, who we're going to talk about later. It was his young boy, his understudy, as it were. I'm not sure if that's the exact term that they use in Japan, but either way. He would basically go on to be the biggest heel in FMW during the late 90s, and was a mainstay in a lot of the Japanese indie scene for quite a number of years, until he decided to gracefully retire after actually helping to get the Ice Ribbon promotion started, which was really, really, really good of him. He's always, from what I've seen and from what I've heard, he is genuinely a really good person. He's very, very giving, which you can see in quite a lot of his matches during the prime of his career. But we'll move on to Tigerjeet Singh, who was a big star during the 1970s in the Toronto territory in Canada, which was mainly due to Toronto having a very high immigrant population from India. If you're Canadian, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. As I recall, he was mainly recruited, not specifically because of his athletic background, but because he basically showed up to the promoter's gym or a show in his full like Indian regalia, and everyone kind of looked at him and thought, that guy's going to sell some tickets. Unfortunately, it wasn't necessarily because he was good at wrestling. But then again, this is back in the days when you could get away with a lot of that stuff. But his most notable appearance in Japanese wrestling was his stint in New Japan during the mid to late 1970s as kind of like a Sheik ripoff. This is at the point when the Sheik, the original Sheik, was doing a lot of stuff for All Japan, for Giant Barber's All Japan, and obviously bit of a rivalry between those promotions. So Antonio Inoki thought, okay, well, if I can't get the original Sheik, I'll get someone who can basically be my own version of the Sheik. Who else do we have? So after that, we have Terry Funk, the legend. We don't need to say any more. And then he faced Leatherface, which in this version was the Rick Patterson version, not the Mike Kirshner version. If I recall correctly, I think Rick Patterson still lives in Japan. But I don't quote me on that. I haven't really been able to find that much about him. I do have an interesting story about Mike Kirshner, though, which led to why Rick Patterson got the Leatherface gimmick.
You told me this in message. I didn't want to go into it because I thought I'll ask, when we're doing the episode kind of thing. But yeah, you mentioned there was two Leatherfaces, and I was like, to me, the whole gimmick itself is freaking mental because obviously, it's kind of like, how are these guys not getting done for freaking copyright infringement or freaking
Well, this is like during the late 80s, early 90s. There wasn't much in the way of like internet, and Japan has kind of like really weird like laws when it comes to parody. And it's an independent wrestling promotion. No one's really making that much money about the whole thing. But anyway, so before IWA Japan started, the promotion that did death matches outside of FMW was called Wing. And excuse me, there was this guy Mike Kirshner, who some people will probably remember as being Corporal Kirshner, who was a Sergeant Slaughter ripoff during the 80s. And Mike Kirshner, anyone who's ever even heard of this guy knows that A, he's a hard nut to crack. He's a legitimate tough guy, and B, he has a really bad temper, as Mick Foley's book tells as well. So the thing about the Leatherface gimmick is that when he makes his entrance, obviously he comes out there with his chainsaw and starts like roaring and going through the fans, and fans like run away like it's I think it's kind of like a callback to a lot of things that are very popular in Japan. Running away from big massive F-off wrestlers. Stan Hansen, Bruiser Brody. It's something that just kind of like is still in the Japanese psyche, as it were. So yeah, what happened is during one of these entrances, a fan tried to get into a fight with Mike, which is not a good idea. I don't need to say anything more. It's not a good idea to try and get into a fight with a 6'4", 280-pound, wrestler who's jacked as all shit, and is probably going to kick your ass if you get in his way. Needless to say, this fan got far more than an average, kick in the arse, which resulted in Mike Kirshner getting arrested. Now, Japanese prisons are probably better than most prisons, and maybe not on the same level of like Norwegian prisons, but either way, Mike Kirshner had to have an extended stay in prison, which by the time that he got out, Wing had closed down and IWA Japan had opened up. Now, at this time, they needed the Leatherface gimmick because it was over. So they gave the Leatherface gimmick to a guy called Rick Patterson, who was this Canadian journeyman, I believe he was. So when Mike Kirshner got out, he was looking for work, realized that IWA Japan was using his gimmick. So, things kind of went as they were. He got hired, and so then we had two Leatherfaces. So what do you do when you got two Leatherfaces? Well, there's two things that you can do. You can either have them fight, or you can make them into a team. That's what they did, the latter one. And they decided to put them in a tag team deathmatch against the native team of Shoji Nakamaki and Hiroshi Ono, who are in the tournament, which we'll talk about later. Needless to say, the match was booked where Nakamaki and Ono would win. Now, neither of them are particularly talented as far as wrestling is going, and they were kind of green at the time. And Mike Kirshner kind of went into business for himself, because from what I've learnt, he didn't want to lose this match, and he kind of went out of his way during the match to make them look like a pair of bitches, which is very unprofessional. I don't need to tell you anymore. And you can kind of see this in the match if you want to track it down, where he gave I believe it was Ono, a uncalled powerbomb on some of the nails after ripping it out of where it was like hung up on the ropes, which is not an easy thing for anyone. But Mike Kirshner was determined to do this, and he got fired for that. And I don't think he. Actually, no. He did actually work the Leatherface gimmick again, but it was in FMW under the name Super Leather. So, yeah, it didn't. He didn't exactly get his. I mean, it's one of those stories that you hear and you just think wrestling was crazy back in those days.
Just didn't do himself any favors. Like, he must have known. There's nothing good's going to come from this. You're going to get fired. You're going to get blacklisted. You're going to get blackballed. Why do it? It's just, I don't know.
Well, I guess he just kind of did it on the heat of the moment. But the thing is, when he got hired from FMW and he got given the name Super Leather, that basically meant that there were no consequences for it. So it's kind of like, yeah, our Leatherface is better than your Leatherface. It's like, yeah, it's one of the things that could only happen in wrestling. I tell you now.
Right, the tournament.
Sorry, we just got a couple of other people. Cactus. I'll just go over these really quickly. I've talked quite a lot about that one. Cactus Jack, who we all know. Terry Gordy, who we know is the 1/3 of the Fabulous Freebirds. Unfortunately, and we'll probably talk about this during the match, during his match. This was after he had a stroke, and he died. He died for, I don't know how long it was, but if you've seen the Dark Side of the Ring episode, you'll know what I'm talking about. But you can kind of see Cactus leading him through the match as we go along. And the last two are Shoji Nakamaki, who was he used to be a baseball journalist who got involved in wrestling later in life. In fact, I think at the time of this match, this tournament, sorry, he was in his 40s. He was nicknamed the Screaming Seller by Mick Foley. Mainly because that was his only selling point, I guess you could say. And Hiroshi Ono, who was a small-time indie guy from the IWA Japan dojo, who was actually retiring in this match. And he went on to become a chiropractor. So, yeah, that's one way to go out.
He probably got a lot of custom on the back of these tournaments as well. So, you know,
probably.
So the tournament itself, though, man, I was just, I sort of said, you know, for the time period and stuff like that, the actual venue is huge. You know, the first thing that struck me, and it made it feel like a big deal, was, you know, it's almost like a WrestleMania size freaking, you know, arena. Yeah,
that was Kawasaki Baseball Stadium, which is no longer around. It got torn down, I believe, in about 2010. I might be misremembering that. I should have checked before we started this broadcast. And excuse me, my cat wants to be let out. I don't know if you saw her. Come on.
I thought she'd spot bait, if I'm honest.
She's probably sick of me talking about death matches for about half an hour. she's not the only one who I've annoyed with my passion about this stuff. Anyway, so yes, shall we go through the main tournament matches?
Yeah, go for it. Just lead me through, and I'll tell you what I wasn't like this.
Okay, so first contest was Mr. Ganosuke versus Tiger Jeet Singh in a barbed wire board chain match. Personally speaking, basic, mainly used as a way to get Tiger over.
You got,
like I said,
I was fully, just kind of like his presence. Like I know what we said about him beforehand, but he definitely had like a presence about him, and the fans, were reacting to him, and he just like the heel heat. I was like, I knew from the get go, like this is the bad guy. This is the guy that I don't want to win.
Mm-hmm. And Ghana, obviously, the match I believe was kept basic and kept short due to the language barrier as well. Though you will notice, for anyone who's ever worked someone, who doesn't speak English as a first language and isn't fluent in it, a lot of wrestling is quite, international. Like, I don't want to take up time by giving examples, but needless to say, if I'm putting a headlock on someone and he's dragging me back to the ropes, I know what he's going to do. And most of the terms that we use in wrestling are English anyway, so there's that.
I think it was about 8 minutes this match, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, roundabout. Tiger finished with his claw. I believe he holds it like that with his thumb and index finger. Yeah. After that.
For the first match, man, like I say, I was just kind of soaking it in at this point, and just like sort of said, I knew who the bad guy was. It was short. I had a feeling, because of it being a tournament, most of the matches would be about 8-10 minutes long. So there wasn't going to be too much of delaying anything. It was just going to be right. Just go at it. Here you go. Here's the action. This is what you paid for. Enjoy, kind of thing.
Yeah, I do think that Tiger was probably hired specifically for this. Specifically because of his name value, and to just basically bring as many old school wrestling fans at the time into the venue. Okay, so next after that, Terry Funk versus Leatherface in another barbed wire board chain match. I will say the pre-match promos that they did didn't really do much to encourage me that this Leatherface is an absolute maniac. Mainly because Rick Patterson was just so bloody polite, But then again, he more than made up for it for his efforts in the match. Even though I will admit, it was a bit slow paced. But as we said before, I think Terry Funk was going to be the natural babyface throughout this entire tournament, which is really, really remarkable when you hear about his story about how he, along with his brother, became the first Gaijin baby faces back during the 70s and 80s for All Japan. But we're getting a little bit off topic here. I noticed you did send me some clips of some of the spots in this match that you're a bit,
Well, because obviously, Leatherface, the chainsaw bit comes out, and he swings at him, and it's perfectly placed. Obviously, Funk gets his arm up, and his fist just hits the end of the mechanical part of the chainsaw before the blade, and it's just literally like that kind of thing. If it just been a few inches off, you're not coming back from that. You're losing a finger, kind of thing. It's literally like, whoa.
Obviously the chainsaw was gimmicked. I don't care how good of a worker you are. There's no way you can take a chainsaw to the head and like a shoot chainsaw to the head and still survive. It's either Hollywood, movie magic, or it's real and you're dead.
Yeah. Well, just for that moment, man, I was like sort of said, that's the thing as well. Again, the magic of wrestling. I was in there. I know it wasn't, but even a shoot one, if something was spinning, something was mechanical, something was making noise, could have still hurt, his hand in any way, shape, or form if it had been off a little bit, and it still made me go, ooh. So kudos to them. And the other bit was the cell. So you got the ring, and you got this massive fence around the audience, It's not a Hell in a Cell.
Base. Yeah, that was part of the. As I said, it was a baseball stadium, so I imagine that was like the part where they do the baseball.
Oh yeah, but it sprung at me of like, you know, Hell in a Cell, especially like when Leatherface and Funk are climbing up it and then kind of sitting on top, you know, whacking each other. Part of me was like, this was a couple of years obviously before, you know, First Blood. Forgot the name of the pay-per-view. If that's it, Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Hell in a Cell, basically. But it just made me think of that, and part of me was like, you know, when they were coming up with the design or the idea of Hell in a Cell, somebody must have kind of had this in the back of their mind, because it's just, even the distance away from the ring to where the mesh was, it looks kind of Hell in a Cell-ish kind of thing.
Yeah, actually, I think the original Hell in the Cell, it was actually inspired by a cage with a roof that was done between, who was it? I think it was Tommy Rich and Buzz Sawyer. I think I might be misremembering. I remember it being mentioned in the DVD for the DVD that was brought out by the WWE about Shawn Michaels. You know, after Shawn Michaels made his return, he talked about how the idea for the Hell in the Cell came up. It's been a number of years since I've seen that interview, though, so feel free to go out and
But, you know, just like we talked about it, you know, we'll bring this up again later on, kind of thing, where you just kind of think, maybe that was influenced, or maybe somebody's making reference to this at some point, you know, as we discussed elsewhere in the final kind of thing. So, but yeah, that was my first thought. And again, you know, I'm a massive mark for Funk. The dude doesn't do anything fast. You know what you're getting with the Funk match. You accept that from, you know, from the out the gate, and just enjoy it. And this was just, Funk at his babyface best against the dastardly Leatherface.
Yes. Yeah, Funk goes through. And then after that, one of my personal favourites from the entire, is the first really good match of the night, Cactus Jack versus Terry Gordy, in a barbed wire bat and thumbtack death match. The Foley's book actually has an interesting story about them going into this match. What the Japanese like to do, especially for a notable event like this, is they like to do press conferences. And Gordy did the usual, you know, 80s promo about, you know, I'm gonna beat this guy. You're going down. You know, I mean what I say. And then Foley, during his promo, he mentioned the actual gimmick that was being given, you know, thumbtacks, you know, and he used, like, from what he said, he remembers using like the, you know, the very corny line of, you know, I'm going to turn you into a human pincushion with these thumbtacks. And then after the promo was like finished, and, you know, the camera guys came off, Gordy came up to him and said, "They never told me that there was going to be thumbtacks in this match." And you know, Foley was like, "Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it." First thing I want to say, banging tune for Cactus Jack.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but Japanese promotions always have banging music.
Yes, and just the whole feel of the show. And like I say, when that music hits and he comes out, it's just like goosebumps. You know, you're just kind of like, oh, you shouldn't be getting like this. Whole show feels bigger. I mean, it's huge. But for people who don't know about it, or, you know, just thinking, deathmatch wrestling, you know, you going into this and you watch it, you know, that's a prime example. You just show them that entrance, and I defy anyone to be like, okay, show me the rest of the show.
Yeah, match was absolutely stellar as well. Cactus Jack always has and always will be the gold standard for deathmatch wrestling in this era. Really, really good structure. Really, really good character work. You can kind of tell that Gordy, if you've ever watched any of Gordy's matches from like All Japan, or, you know, his time during the Fabulous Freebirds, especially in World Class, you could tell the difference between him back then and him in this match is night and day. You can see, me, because I know what to look for, I can see that Mick's calling pretty much the entire match to him, you know, telling me, hit me here, you know, hit me, go here, do this, do that, do that. And Gordy, you know, hats off to him, was doing his best. The most notable spots for me were the usual Cactus Jack bumps, you know, a fucking rocket launcher from the second rope to the outside onto concrete, as well as that brutal stomp on the tacks with him going into Nick's ear, which he does twice in this match, and that rough-looking power bomb where he gets like the pins like strung on his arm and his back and all. Yeah, that's. And the fact that Gordy wasn't in the best of shape, you know, hats off to Nick for, like, you know, trusting Terry to do that stuff.
Oh no, definitely. But it was, like, say, you had the in-ring action as well, but this was like the first one as well, really, where they took it out of the ring and they kind of slowed it down a little bit, and they kind of around the Irish whips into the barriers, just that kind of actual wrestling as well. It wasn't just deathmatch stuff. You know, it's the kind of stuff that we see on a weekly basis, you know, on mainstay promotions. But they merged it in so perfectly. And it just, I say both guys know what they're doing. Even Terry Gordy, you know, after the medical issues, with the assistance of Foley, you know, both of these guys could probably do this, you know, with their eyes closed.
Yeah. It does make me wonder just how much better the match would be if Gordy hadn't had his stroke. But you know, it's one of those things. Maybe things would have been different. But the fact is, even with the medical issues that he was having at the time, you know, Foley carried him to probably one of his better matches from this period of his life.
Oh.
And he didn't have to take any drawing pins, neither.
Exactly. So he protected him. It's like, they might be in the match, but you know, it's okay. It's fine.
Yeah.
Cool. Let Foley do what Foley does. Foley will take them. So.
Yeah. All right, and after that, my personal favourite of the opening round matches, Nakamaki versus Ono. Really, really underrated match by the two native talent. It's a bit clunky at times, personally, but I think this is kind of a precursor to the current style of deathmatch commonly seen in Big Japan and Freedoms these days. You know, sort of like a combination of strike exchanges and fiery cells. You know, similar to that you find in New Japan or Noah or All Japan, but with the kind of like the faster pace and more move orientated matches that you commonly find in the lucha inspired promotions like Dragon Gate. Plus, obviously, you know, the deathmatch gimmickry. I think it had a really good start with those fiery cells from the barbed wire back shots and the strike exchanges. Lots of brawling around, and I think they had a really, really great finishing sequence with the attacks. Like, I loved the reversal of the bulldog into the backdrop driver into the attacks, and then the reversal into the crossbody, which led to, you know, powerbomb, the Miz gimmick, you know, with the front Russian leg sweep into the fucking tacks. I mean, fucking hell. And he barely had any wrist tape on as well. That's what made it so cringeworthy for me.
Oh, okay. I wouldn't notice that, but yeah, now you point it out, you'd be like, yeah, you know, there's certain areas you want to protect. It's kind of like, yeah that makes sense.
They fucking went at it in that one. Like, you could tell that they had a tremendous trust with each other, and Japanese wrestlers always go full auto when it comes to strikes. So yeah. Also, I will say, banging tune for Nakamaki as well. It's actually a song I'm quite a fan of, Autumn Lords by Tony McAlpine.
Okay.
Instrumental, but bloody hell, it's an absolute banger.
So, yeah, this one was kind of like, as you sort of said, because with it being the two natives, the pace difference. Again, no offense to anybody else prior to this kind of thing, but when these two got in, there was a huge noticeable uplift in tempo kind of thing. You know, the pace picked up. It was just snug. It was tight. It flowed really well.
Yeah, and Ono managed to retire in probably one of his best matches ever. That said, he did do like the occasional like appearance for like some other indies, but yeah, for a guy who for a guy that hadn't been doing it very long, and decided to call it quits so he could get a real job. He went out with a huge bank. Yeah.
So yeah, kudos again, a rarity within the business. So it's just something else that kind of adds to the prestige of this show. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good, like I said, it stood out for me because it was just different to what we've seen previously as well, but in a good way. So I was happy with this one.
Okay. We'll skim over the undercard. There was a cruiserweight match after this with Flying Kid Ichihara and Takashi Okano, who would actually go on to be a deathmatch wrestler in Big Japan, would you believe, like in the late 90s, under his like mask gimmick that he'd done like, early in his career. And then there was a comedy match involving two Puerto Rican talent. One Puerto Rican talent and one Japanese guy, who were both in masks. We can skip over that and go to the semi-finals. First semi-final was Tiger Jeet Singh versus Terry Funk. I believe it was a barbed wire board and glass death match. Again, I would say basic, slow-paced. Puts over the heat. It has the biggest heel, biggest babyface in the entire tournament. Both veterans. I wouldn't say it was the best one, but it was I suppose you could say it's more of a character-based one. You get the two guys with names, and it was also used to establish that there is a rivalry between Cactus and Terry Funk when Cactus comes in and tries to use Tiger Jeet Singh's his like weird fencing sword to come in to try and take out Funk, that accidentally cost Tiger the match. I did actually have to double check this, but apparently on this tour and like the following tour, Cactus Jack and Tiger Jeet Singh were kind of like a tag team. But yeah, what do you think of it?
The boxes around the ring, like the glass sort of, just when you heard the glass sort of break and the fans' reactions to it and everything as well.
Yeah.
Though, they were getting louder and louder as the matches went on. And yeah,
it's really sad though that the cameramen didn't pick up when the glass broke though.
Yeah,
but
that kind of made it worse for me because I heard the fans' reactions, but I was kind of like, fuck, what have I missed? I can't see it. So in my head, I'm just kind of played in my head. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's probably not as bad as it was, but that's how now I'm imagining it. Just poor Funk, actually, just spoiled.
Yeah, Funk sells like he was being killed in this one. I always felt like really terribly sorry for Funk whenever I'd see him do these these crying sells that he did as a babyface in Japan. The ones that he did in his first barbed wire match with Cactus Jack, I think it was either previous year or the year or earlier in the year during this thing. We can probably talk about that sometime, but we'll skip over and just get back to the tournament. So yeah, after that was Cactus Jack versus Shoji Nakamaki in a barbed wire board and spike nail death match.
I missed this one. I didn't see this one, so for some reason it was missing.
Well, I'll probably link you to the YouTube video that I did, but I will say for this one, again, Mick Foley proving that he is the gold standard when it came to death matches at the time. It was a really fun brawl, a lot of back and forth brawling, and use of the barbed wire boards. Really, really good elbow off the apron into the nail board with Nakamaki under. Again, the Screaming Seller does a killer blade job. There's even a nasty bit at one point where Mick gets a bit of barbed wire stuck in his arm after he takes a bump into the barbed wire board, and he's like, just pulls it out. He doesn't start splurting or anything like that, but the fact that it was there and he was kind of pulling at his skin, you kind of look at that and you think, ugh, can relate. Again, because I know what to look for, I can see Cactus. Now, obviously, there is a language barrier, but I can see Foley was calling his stuff. He was getting to a point where he was like, headbutt, boom. And Ono does his thing where he just completely no sells, headbutts the turnbuckle, and then like nuts Foley in his face, practically.
True style of it. Dude, it just sounds like I'll check it out once I get sort of the link, because also I want to go back and watch it. It's a Foley, and I was kind of good because I was going through, and it kind of went from the Funk match to I got Dan Severn, and then I got the final, and I was just like, I'm missing a match. I knew I was missing one, so I was like,
yeah, I definitely recommend you go and look at it when we're done here. So yeah, after that we had two non-tournament matches. First one, it's a tag match between the Headhunters, two 400-pound Puerto Rican twins who can somehow do moonsaults, versus Los Cowboys. It was I believe it was Silver King and someone else. It's an okay match, nothing to write home about, but yeah. Headhunters become the tag team champions, as they often do and have often referenced in their theme songs throughout Japan, which you should definitely go and check. It's like this is the sound of war. That's all I'm going to say. Anyway, so after that.
Dude, it was a match afterwards I've been itching to get to as well, in fairness.
Oh, yes. The most underrated match that Dan Severn has ever been in versus Tarzan Goto. Dan Severn, or as I refer to him, the ultraviolet Freddie Mercury. He had a really, really good scrap of a match. Really nasty, I would say this. Really nasty blade job by Goto. Though he's always done really nasty blading. That broken bottle spot, seeing Dan Severn throwing chairs from the outside right into the ring in a rage somehow popped me, even now, And I was actually impressed he could throw them as far as he did.
Oh, it was good. Yeah, it was a good distance away. Only like 15, 20
really good. Yeah. The spot that watching it back earlier today, I really loved the spot that they did with Goto having like a chair and still being in the ring, whilst Severn was like trying to figure out, right, how am I going to get in? How am I going to get on top of this guy? And he ends up rolling in and grabs the chair, use it to block, and then they both get up and start doing the dueling, spot with the chairs, and then once he's like knocked the chair out of his way, he goes straight in, hooks him, pushes him to ropes, and does the belly to belly over. I'm going to steal that for the next hardcore match that I'm in. I fucking well promise you. I'll have to make a promise to myself. In fact, I hope anyone who's watching this, who might be in the business, is watching this. Remind me to do this spot. You'll know where I've stopped.
I was going to say to you this, just everything about this match just seemed real. It seemed genuine. It seemed like a shoot in the sense of like, both guys, the moves, the ugliness of it, just the transitions. It all seemed like legit. And then I saw that and I was like, that's the first time I've ever seen that. But that is what you would do in real life. If you're trying to get in a ring with somebody who had a steel chair, mate, you're going into the bit where the chairs are, you're grabbing one and you're using it as a shield. Just everything about this just made it legit.
Yeah. That's why I've said that this is probably one of the most underrated matches. I mean, granted, Dan Severn, if you judge him purely by his, WWF stint, he was a rather unremarkable wrestler. But this match, I think, like, it points out that he truly deserved as many titles as he did outside of WWF.
He was NWA champion at this point, and he cut some.
Yeah, he was.
£10 of gold on his shoulder. Wow. Yeah. Didn't know that. I never knew he was NWA champ. So I was like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, like I forget how long he held the title for, but yeah, keep in mind this was at a point where NWA was. It wasn't exactly like dead, but it was kind of like it was a lot more, indie level than it was. It didn't have the same prestige as it used to be, as it used to have.
It's still cool to see Dan with that belt on, and yeah, I can't recommend this match enough. I just legitimately, like I said, I was just sat there watching it. Like, honestly, as a wrestling, all wrestling fans are like, we always think everything's work until we get told otherwise. Well, I was generally watching this and it was blurring the lines. I was legitimately like, as Goto, I'm just like, I'm here for the ride. I'm loving it. So,
yeah. All right. Now, the moment we've all been waiting for, the finals. It's the match. It's the match that made Mick Foley and this tournament famous. It's basically a lot of gimmicks piled into one match. Let me read it out what I have in my notes. No rope, barbed wire, exploding barbed wire boards, and exploding ring time bomb deathmatch.
10 minutes.
That is way, way, way too long of a name for a match this fucking awesome. So we were just going to call it the Kawasaki Dream Finals and just be done with it. That said, it does show like it is kind of like testament to one thing in Japanese wrestling, or at least Japanese deathmatch wrestling. They have extraordinarily long and creative names for their gimmicks.
They don't care.
It's fun, don't get me wrong, but it does make it very frustrating when you're trying to type things out and then it seems like you have like two lines on the notepad that you're using, just for this one, just like for the one gimmick, But anyway, we're getting off topic. One thing I will say upon reviewing it, really, really, really good build to the bumps on the exploding boards. It's a really good example of putting a gimmick over slowly. In the sense they go like when Mick was like punching Funk and he was staggering back to the board, and then he would kind of stagger forward. So then he'd punch him again. He's going back and forth, and eventually there was the last one, which caused Funk to like stagger back and then do the whole nesty plunge backwards onto the board.
As the Irish Whip as well, when he was Irish ripping him into the ropes, and Funk was like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah, that thing. I don't know why, but it's always the little things that pop in me these days.
The neoshes, the little touches. Just again, as a fan, you'll notice these things way more than I do, kind of thing. But it's the little things that you wouldn't notice until you kind of watch it again. You're like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, just the little mannerisms, the sells, the reactions. But yeah, like you sort of said, that's because I remember again Foley sort of saying, Funk legitimately Funk's punches look like they're nothing. And from what Foley sort of says, they don't. He's very good at protecting the other person, but he did cut. He basically he reopened a cut on Foley's eye with those two quick jabs at the start. So that's kind of like, yeah, here we go.
That said, however, from what I recall, Terry Funk was one of the few people from like that era where they knew how to they knew how to punch someone and get a hard way cut, without like absolutely scrambling the person's brains. But it's one of the lost little tricks, in the business. Kind of, depending on who you talk to, maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's not. Not going to say either way, but he came from a different era.
Yeah, that's it. But like you sort of said, mate, it was just the whole storytelling. Like say, Funk kind of like wavering, like no, not yet, no, not yet. Foley doing the same. Again, this is two guys that we both know can tell a story. They get psychology. I don't care what I use. I'm a massive. I love the whole kind of sidebar for a second. I love the whole Ric Flair and Mick Foley beef. Flair saying that Foley can't wrestle, which is fucking ridiculous kind of thing, and vice versa. Mick Foley's in my top 5 of all time ever for everything he's ever done, kind of thing. So I love watching this guy in the ring. I love seeing him tell a story, and I know he gets the psychology. I know he's more than just the guy who puts his body on the line or loves pain, kind of thing. He gets the business 100%.
Yeah, and every single match that he has in this entire tournament is a testament to I've said it enough times at this point. Mick Foley was the gold standard when it comes to deathmatch wrestling in this era. In fact, the matches even like hold up now. Like you could have swapped around some of the gimmicks that he did for stuff that we use these days, assuming that Mick would be willing to use stuff like twos and gussets and all sorts of other stuff. But yeah, he'd probably find a way to make them believable, make them useful. But anyway, there's actually quite an interesting story from Mick's book about those exploding boards, the C4 boards as he refers to them. Earlier in the day, when they were just like testing out this stuff, well, obviously you kind of know about it's not proper C4, right? Yeah. For anyone who has been in the army, C4 or PE3 or whatever it is that the armed forces refer to it as, it's a directed explosive. Basically means that you put it onto a certain place, all the energy is like transferred through it. If they tried to do that and use it in the wrestling business, one of two things are going to happen. You're going to kill someone, or you're going to, because the energy is all going to go into the one person, and no arm, no back, whatever, or it's going to go straight down into the ring, and now you've fucked the ring. What they actually did was use these thing called black powder charges. It's kind of gunpowder, but it's kind of like a low form of gunpowder. It's one that's less dangerous. They actually use them a lot in the pyrotechnics that they use, pretty much every single WWE opener. And they were just testing the whole thing out. And Mick mentioned on the first try that they did using the black powder charges, the whole thing the explosion went off all around like the then vacant Kawasaki Stadium, and Mick was like, there's no way, and Nakamaki and believe someone else, I forget who you mentioned, they were watching the whole thing, and they were like, yeah, don't use that. But Funk was just kind of like, oh no, don't worry about it, we'll be fine. Just goes to show that Funk was very persuasive. So Mick Foley's first bump, I believe, was a hip toss into the exploding board, and he felt the heat of it, but it wasn't that bad. So he kind of thought, I guess I was just making something out of nothing. Until eventually, later in the match, when he took a backdrop into one of them and he landed straight on it, and the explosion practically burnt part of his arm. Which is, where the story about him smelling like cigarettes and overdone steak on the plane on the way home, and him having to basically pretend that, I walked. There was just the guy next to me was smoking, and it's rubbed off on all my clothes and everything like that. And she was insisting. His wife and his dad were kind of insisting, that something smells like it's burning. Do you know anything about that, Mick? And eventually had to be like, yeah, it's me. I'm sorry.
Well, that sounds Funk's tricep as well.
It did.
Funk's tricep. He landed arm down on it as well, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But they did that to get the fans back after the 10 minutes was up, and we got the AEW.
The exploding ring time bomb. They were trying to go for an FMW style exploding ring, which you can check out in your own time, and they're absolutely. I mean, they are really dramatic moments, and absolutely insane. And I would have loved to have seen one of these live. But instead, it turned out to be a precursor to the infamous Kenny Omega, John Moxley exploding ring. You could safely say that it was a little bit of a disappointment.
And even
the fact that, Terry Funk kind of put over that was fucked up, So, I mean, I know that we're not supposed to point out when things go wrong, but in this instance, it's like you could have seen it from space.
Yeah. You've got to acknowledge it. But obviously, that's then, yeah, they did that kind of spot very quickly to get them back. And at this point, Funk was just a gibbering just mess, apparently, if I remember correctly as well. Foley was sort of saying, he was trying to talk to Funk, and Funk was just like,
yeah. I actually checked the book as well. I'm guessing that might have been from the blood loss or the shock, because when you're rushing straight, Funk didn't fuck about with the bumps into the exploding boards, and I can't imagine it's a pleasant experience to go through that.
Nope. So it did that to pull the audience back into it. And I think it ran for a couple of minutes after us, didn't it? We had a couple of more spots like that.
Yeah, the bump off. Yeah, the elbow drop off the ladder.
Sorry, I forgot about that. Bloody hell. Yeah, that kind of, if that did pull the audience back, right, we're getting a ladder out, doing the Foley elbow drop, and his blood was so thick.
Yeah, the iconic crimson mask, an image which has, forever been iconic for this tournament and for Mick Foley in general throughout his entire career. And they did the bump off the ladder into the barbed wire as well.
Fair play to them. They went above and beyond, because they kind of knew the fans would be a bit like, it's like, right, forget that. Let's do this for 5 minutes, give them something to remember, send them home, kind of like, we fucked up here, but god damn it, we gave you everything, else that we had, I think.
Yeah, the finish was a little anticlimactic, but it's understandable considering how badly hurt both of them were. But the tournament got Cactus Jack over as the original King of the Death Matches, and helped kickstart his career, reinvigorate his career, until eventually, I believe it was the following year, he actually got an offer from the WWF to go over there and, the rest is history, as it were.
Yeah, 96, a year later. Basically, he then revitalized or re-energized Undertaker's career. There you go. That's how Foley is, and that's why I hold him in such high regard.
I will say one thing about the promo that Mick did in the locker room after. He pointed himself out as being referred to as the American Onita, which is also a match that I would have loved to have seen happen, but unfortunately, Father Time and circumstances being what they were, we never got to see Atsushi Onita versus Cactus Jack in this era, nor will we ever will, due to both guys being in their 60s. Well, I believe Foley is in his late 50s. I know that Onita is in his early 60s now, and both of them are absolutely wrecked physically. So it would have been nice.
One of those dream matches you have to put down to, and you kind of play it out in your head. You can fantasy book it all you want, kind of thing. And it will never be ruined, because it's never going to happen. So book the greatest match possible in your head, close your eyes and enjoy it, kind of thing. So, but yeah, dude, as a whole, I thoroughly enjoyed this show. I thought it was a great starting point, because it goes to show, when it's done right, and you've got the right people involved in the right location, mate, it felt special.
Yeah. Like I said at the beginning, when I was when we were discussing this on Messenger, I wanted to choose. The reason why I chose this specific match or specific card in order to get things started, I wanted something that practically anyone could kind of look at this, and if they didn't have an idea of what deathmatch wrestling was about when it's done really, really well, at least in this one, they will. I didn't want to give them any random deathmatch that might have gone viral and is just unbelievably violent to the point where you don't see the actual beauty when it comes to this style of wrestling. You know, it is violent, it is extreme, but when it's done right, the storytelling in deathmatch wrestling is second to none. Like, it's on par with anything else that you could find, anything else that you could point towards me. Yeah, granted, true enough. Deathmatch wrestling, hardcore wrestling, ultra-violent wrestling, whatever you want to call it, it's not for everyone. It's for us.
That's another thing, I suppose. I think that's what people are very quick to be dismissive of it. You know, like I sort of said, you know, spoke to Walton when I had him on the episode. He kind of put me on the spot because I was sort of saying, you know, deathmatch wrestling seems to have had a resurgence. It seems to be doing, you know, it's building and building and building now. You know, it's leveling up. Everybody involved, it's kind of coming together. And he put me on the spot to be, and he asked why I thought that was. And for me, it's credible. Everybody involved in it now, as a wrestling fan, we know, we've seen it with this show that we've just watched. You know, like the main two stays, Foley and Funk, they can work various styles of matches, not just death matches. They're not just doing death matches because that's all they can do. They're doing it because they're passionate about it, because they love it. They love the fans, the shows. And for British deathmatch wrestling, for me, you know, like, you know, you've got yourself, obviously, B.A. Rose, Franco Fate, Alton Thorne, you know, Lou Nixon, Brett Semtex, you know, any guys that I can reel off, kind of thing. Any one of those guys can do other shows besides death matches. They can do the family shows, they can do the True Grits, they can do the soft pros, they can do, you know, Rev Pros, Progress, anything. They're not just doing death matches because that's what they're limited to. They're doing it because they're passionate about it and it's genuine.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is probably something we can probably do for another episode, but I'd love to, at one point, do an episode dedicated entirely to an experienced versus an inexperienced deathmatch wrestler, but at the same time, a trained deathmatch wrestler versus an untrained backyarder, or whatever you want to call it. Or alternatively, even like a deathmatch guy who's top tier versus a quote pure wrestler. And plenty of these matches have happened, and there are plenty of examples that I could give. And who knows, we could probably, I only have like a short list of that stuff, but who knows, we could probably even like get a few people in the hardcore scene that we have here in the deathmatch scene that we have here in the UK, and they could probably put their own thoughts into it.
Yeah, man. Again, you are teaching me with this. It's been done obviously on Work the Left Side. Obviously, I'm here. But I said to you before we hit record, you know, I want you to lead this. I'm here to be taught. I'm here to be talked to and, you know, educated when it comes to deathmatch wrestling. So you come up with these ideas. You think, you know, whatever you think is going to work. Yeah, I'm happy just to sit here and just be like, yes, you know, teach me.
Honestly, I would love. I think that deathmatch wrestling as a whole has gotten a bad reputation for, in some cases, like the right reasons, but in a lot of cases, the wrong reasons. Like we can all like have a laugh whenever Jim Cornette makes his, you know, outlaw macho bullshit, you know, stuff like that. You know, sometimes, you know, him going off is really, really funny. But at other times, you look at that stuff and you think, man, you know, if you just understood, you know. This is a vain attempt, I know. It's probably not going to, you know, there are probably some people who are watching this and going to think, you know, what's this fucking idiot think he's doing? But I'm close to 40. I've watched these like styles of matches for close to half of my adult life, and I have never stopped loving it. I can watch a Ring of Honor like 60-minute draw. I can watch, you know, WWE, you know, sports entertainment style. I can watch any style of wrestling, and I can see its strong points and I can appreciate and love its strong points, regardless of whichever style it is. I just really wish that people could learn to love, deathmatch wrestling as much as I do.
Oh, that's hopefully, if we can convert one or two through this, that's the point. It's the base, just how good it can be, and not to pigeonhole it. That's the key thing. Don't dismiss it. So, but we'll wrap up episode 1.
I will say one thing before we finish, though.
Okay.
If you out there are watching this and you're having thoughts about being a deathmatch wrestler, I will say one thing. Learn how to wrestle first.
That ties back to what we were saying beforehand, which is why I think it's so credible now, because most people can. I legitimately thought, though, you was going to sort of say then, if you're thinking about getting into deathmatch wrestling, don't forget your red stripe and your.
Yes, well, we're not being sponsored by Red Stripe just yet, so let's not go that far. But yes, aspirin will always help. Just don't take too many.
Just put your teeth there.
Yes, remember, read the instructions on the back.
Which I've got to obviously shout you out, because I went through. I've said that so many times now as a result of, I am referencing you. I am quoting you from your episode. When anything bad happened in a match or somebody took a knock, I always had the kind of red stripe, or a couple of paracetamol, or just grit your teeth, get on with it. It's fine.
The only reason I made that line was because that whole when you started referencing David Arquette and him freaking out when he was in a match with Nick Gage. It's like, come on, if you're in a match with Nick Gage, you're going to get cut up with his pizza cutter. You're probably going to take a light tube to the head. Shut the fuck up. Take 2 of these. Maybe take a drink of this, or water if you're not a drinker like me. Shut the fuck up. Grit your teeth. It's going to happen, okay? Shut up.
That's it. That is the end of the episode right there. We cannot top that.
Actually, maybe I can top that, because I haven't done any shilling for my merchandise. I'm wearing my new T-shirt right now, Homicidal Black Metal, designed by the lovely people at Fast Count Clothing. So yeah, please buy the merch. Buy the merch.
I was going to do that,
or I'll come round your house and stab you with this.
I was going to give you a chance to sell the merch afterwards, dude. Don't worry, it's not my first word. Why not? I was going to plug the merch for you. So, but yeah, obviously, episode 1 is done. It's wrapped. We'll get our thinking caps on. You can obviously let me know what you think we should do for episode 2. We'll discuss it, and honestly, mate, like I said, I look forward to seeing what you've got in store, because I'm looking forward to this journey. I'm looking forward to learning more about it, becoming more appreciative of it, kind of thing. So, but for now, let people know where they can hit you up on the socials, and obviously see all the merchandise you have. Because you got another T-shirt as well, haven't you? You've got another one.
I've got 2 T-shirts at the moment. I kind of wanted to get a third one out, but I messed up. I had some unexpected expenses, and pre-orders were a little bit light on this one, but it's still going to get up there at some point. So yeah, you can get you can contact me, or follow my socials at Instagram and on Twitter X at Radu Bulat, or Radu_Bulat. I forget which one it is. And message me if you want to buy the merch.
Obviously, we'll tag Radu in all our posts as well when this gets uploaded. So if you're not following him, please do so. If you can, if you want to support, buy that tee. Obviously, we're closely associated with Fast Count as well. So, it's good on them. It's obviously good for Radu. It's good for myself, because, I'm pimping this shit out. So, and if you want to contact them on their socials, hit Fast Count up on Twitter, see what T-shirt designs they're doing, what they're working on. Say hi to the guy who runs it. He's feeling a bit unloved at the minute, I think. So, hit Fast Count up on Twitter, say hi. Obviously, followers, you should be doing anyway if you're watching this.
And buy his merch. Buy all of his merch.
Buy all of his merch. Buy all of Fast Count's merch. Buy all of Radu's merch. Buy
Yes,
everybody.
please do. I like
Christmas.
money.
Yes.
As much as I like Red Stripe.
More money. That's right. There you go. Get everybody in your family a Radu t-shirt. Take a picture of it. A holiday photo picture in front of a Christmas tree. Terrifier style. Blood dripping down it. Chainsaw behind you. Radu Bulat t-shirts. Bosh.
Yes, please do. Just don't tell the don't tell the Met.
Obviously, thank you. Thank you for watching. Hit like, subscribe, share, comment, do all the generic stuff that I always ask you to do. And we will see you again very, very soon. I will be back later in the week with. It's a double bill we have because it's Halloween season. It's spooky time. I will be joined by Axel the Clown and Freaky Felicia, or their younger siblings for the first part, probably. So yeah, join us for that one. It'll be lots of fun. So remember, always work the left side. Goodbye.